Friends, we are so excited to have the founder and frontman of the band Deliverance, Jimmy Brown, with us.
Hello.
Deliverance released seminal records such as Weapons of Our Warfare, Stay of Execution, and Learn. In 2018, Jimmy released his first solo record entitled Eraserhead. He also has a new project called Novella that he's releasing in 4 parts. Welcome, Jimmy. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm thankful to have you guys. Thank you.
Welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
an
you.
honor to have you, sir.
And we're going to kind of go a little bit different than our normal questions, Jimmy. We're going to kind of go forward to backwards here.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to talk about this Novella project. It's a 4-part project that's only available through your website. What can you tell us about the whole project as a whole with it?
Well, it's I'm super happy to be doing it. I've been a lot of people know, and some people know, some people don't know. But my Patreon's been going for about 5 years now, and I've been doing special projects for them this whole time. And this actually Novella started as I'm only going to do it for the patrons, but then with the addition of Jim Chaffin, Larry Farkas, and Manny Morales, I was like, this stuff's too cool. I got to get it out there. And I didn't want to release it through the usual channels, if you know what I mean. And nothing against the usual channels, but I've exhausted and tired myself with those guys. As much as I love them all, I really do. But the other labels, but I just figured, you know what, I could probably do this on my own. Now, everything that's been going on with Novella too, I've been saying, gosh, I should have stuck with, maybe went with somebody, but either way, it's all good. But they're collections of stories. It's funny, I get a lot of lambasting from people that, "Oh, why don't you mention Jesus in your lyrics, and why don't you mention God in your lyrics?" And it's just like, I mean, it's funny that after all these years we still are answering the same questions, because I've been getting the same things since Stay of Execution, and because I changed up my lyrical style. And part of it is I don't see myself as evangelical in the sense that once Deliverance signed to a Christian record label and our audience became Christian based, and we were the alternative to Metallica, I had to switch gears, because all our lyrics were outreach, evangelical, tell the gospel story. I mean, the first album, the Greetings of Death demo, the After Greetings demo, there it is. Those are very forward, reach the lost lyrics, right? But after we became a Christian band, playing only Christian festivals, I mean, Deliverance, we didn't play Christian, we didn't even know what Christian show. We didn't play Calvary Chapel and all that other stuff. We were playing the club circuit in LA. We were playing on the Sunset Strip, the Whiskey, the Troubadour, the Gazaris, Roxy, the clubs, and that's who we were playing with, the Waters Club in San Pedro, and we were opening for bands like Dark Angel and Viking, and we became friends with all these guys because we loved them, and they respected us. They didn't care that we were Christians. They just, but they respected us. But you had maybe a few stragglers, and you have 300 people, maybe 10 believers, but the rest of them weren't. So to thrust the gospel message through our music like that, and everybody used to call me the Jimmy Swaggart of heavy metal, because the way I used to preach, my preaching style, is very charismatic. So it made sense back then. But once our audiences were primarily Christian, and we played our first Christian festival called the His Festival in 1987, and from that point on, it changed. And then we signed to Frontline, and it changed. Now we couldn't play a show and say our album's out, go to Licorice Pizza or go to the Warehouse Records, and no, you had to tell them go to Lighthouse Christian Bookstore, because that's the only place you can get it. And we realized at that point – things had changed. And I knew from that point out. I mean, that's why if you saw the drastic difference from Deliverance to Weapons. I remember sitting down and penning a lot of the lyrics, and George was, intermittent his thing in there, and I told him, I'm trying to write more to the believer. My vision for this is to be like a Bible study put to music. But we're talking the believer, that's our audience. I go, it makes no sense, because George used to love to talk in between songs, and he's up there preaching to the lost, and everybody's yeah, amen, praise God, but there wasn't any lost people there. They're all Christians. And as we started to tour, and I started realizing, wow, okay, I'm really going to have to lyrically shift from this point forward. And from this point forward, I was just like, I want to take a cue from the Psalms and start writing lyrics like David did, because David had such a great approach. If he was mad, he showed it. If he was angry, I mean, how many times did he say, what, God, can't you just kill my enemies? I mean, get rid of them. Get rid of them. Just get them out of my life. I don't want these people around. I don't even want them on planet Earth anymore. Get rid of them. I mean, think about the humanity behind that. I love that. Think about Song of Songs. You could try to sit and say, oh, well, it's a typology of Christ, being we're the bride of Christ. No, it's not. It's humanity being shown through Scripture, that we're human beings living a life on this planet and experiencing every single type of emotion. We laugh about the shortest verse in the Bible. What is it? Jesus wept. But it's a crucial and incredibly important verse. And why? Because it showed humanity. It showed angst, depression, upsetness. When he sweated so hard, he started sweating blood. That actually happens from people that are having such intense anxiety attacks. Well, think about it, because what was his prayer? I don't want to die. He didn't say it that way. He said, let this cup pass from me. So that's the poetic way of saying, you know what? These people are trash. I don't want to give my life up. I mean, I paint humanity. I love painting flesh and blood all over this stuff. And I just started seeing a difference. And that's why I started kind of storytelling with my lyrical approach. And if you guys know me, I start here, I take you on a journey with my answers, and then I come back around. So, but I basically said to myself, I'm going to have to start writing for the believer, because the believer is my audience. And there's a lot more than trying to tell you about Noah and tell you about different biblical stories, because the bottom line is, if you're a believer and you're depending on my music and my lyrics to educate you, man, you're not a believer. I'm just going to say it straight out, because you should be cracking open that book and reading it and studying it like when I was 10 years old and read it cover to cover 3 times straight in a row. And that's what you've got to do, because how else are you going to know it? And then when you start, I grew up in a multi-language household, so I knew, wow, there's a big difference between things said in Spanish and said in English, or said in German and said in English. And English is absolutely the worst language in the world, because it's completely devoid of so many things as far as translation. So we can never really get a literal translation into English, because there's so many words that don't really make a lot of sense. Now, that would have never made sense to me had I not grown up knowing other languages. But since I did, it intrigued me by the time I was 15 that I wanted to study Hebrew. I wanted to study Greek. I wanted to study Aramaic because I knew there's probably other things not being said. There you go. I mean, you got to. And when I started embracing all that kind of ideology, I said, you know, it's time for me writing to the believer to tell them stories about being human and trying to live a life that says, yes, my faith is here, but I live here. You know, Learn, Stay, River. Those were very important records for me. And I guess I've just continued that style. So Novella is truly kind of a definite, true departure because the stories are now a real individual. Because with the records, I try to kind of keep a theme. There's no theme with these. Each song is like a split personality. People are going to think I'm schizophrenic.
Well, but musically, Jimmy, I'm going to call it's very Bowie-esque, David Bowie.
Thank you.
And I know that you're a huge fan of his. So would you say I'm right in that it's very Bowie-esque sounding musically?
You know, I think there is elements. It's funny, you know, Alan Aguirre, who's I'm a humongous fan of his, but he's also a very good friend. You know, immediately I sent it to him, and he, you know, he listened to it, and first thing he did is like the first track, the warm up. You know, he's like, "Oh my gosh, dude, that's like," he goes, "That's like right off Aladdin Sane, man." He goes, "It's just a great story tell." You know, he goes, "I could totally tell where you were going with it." You know, it's like being at a party and you're it's from that first person's observance. You know, I just want to get out of here. You know, and that's me because that's the way I am. I don't like going to especially the Vegas parties and stuff. So, but then when you go into the other stuff, it's funny. He picked out the influences real heavily, like Terry Taylor and DA, and with some of the rest of the songs. Right. You know, but I definitely hear the Bowie and Reich influence that have kind of always been a mainstay with my writing style, because the first three Queensrÿche records were very pinnacle for me, and anything Bowie's done. So it's kind of a weird amalgamation of them both, you know.
Well, and there's going to be like 4 separate parts, as I understand it. Do you have any plans, like if someone didn't get the first part or whatever, like, are you going to release this in its entirety?
All 4, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Great.
All 4 is a set with the poster that's going to have all 4, because the cool thing about it is the way my artist, he's so brilliant. He draws everything by hand on sketches, then he scans it into Photoshop to do all the coloring, but he actually draws everything by hand, his shading, everything. And he did my Eraserhead record. You know, he did my Assimilation album. He did Hear What I Say. He's done everything, but he's drawn this in that it's going to be one big album cover. Okay. But we're only seeing sections of it at a time, as with each release. That's pretty cool.
Cool. Well, and speaking of Eraserhead, that was your first solo recording that came out in 2018. Have you been wanting to make a solo record for a while, Jimmy, or what's the history of Eraserhead?
Well, I came home from our very, very first tour. It was called the Victory Tour in 1990. And I was already kind of not digging where Deliverance was. I mean, we'd already been an entity for 5 years. And I always played with other people. I always jammed with other people. Tried to always stay diversified. You know, I didn't want to just be known as Jimmy, you know, guy, you know. So I worked with hip hop artists. I worked with a lot. I mean, I worked with a lot of people. And I went to the record label and I told them, hey, man, I really want Terry Taylor to produce a solo album for me. And they went to Terry and they said, hey, you know, remember that kid you met who's you know, last year, blah blah blah. And he's like, yeah. And they said, well, he wants to do a solo album, he wants you to produce it. And he said, no, just flat out no, not interested. And they played him the first album and he just listened to it. He was like, no. So I was like, oh, that's great. Okay. And I said, did you tell him that it's like kind of like a Bowie thing I want to do? And they said, well, we didn't really get a chance. Terry's very dismissive. And he is. So they hooked me up with a producer named Scott Blackwell. And he had done like remixes for Donna Summer and Pet Shop Boys and stuff like that. So it was kind of weird. And so I called Glenn Rogers, who was already out of Deliverance. And I called him up and I said, hey, man, I'm going in the studio to cut some demos for a solo project idea for Frontline. You want to come along? So me and Glenn went over and I said, between you and me, we could play guitar, bass, and we'll program the drums because it's just a demo, but we're going to work with Scott. And we made a disastrous 3-song demo. I mean, and when I mean disaster, it's so bad I won't even. When you join my Patreon, you get so much crap from me, like weird. In fact, one of the folders I send out is called Obscura. There's just weird stuff in there. But this is so bad I won't include it. Because I mean, when I'm by myself in my room listening to it, I like turn the volume down and hang my head in shame. You know, I mean, it's just that bad.
Now, you know that's going to be the holy grail, Jimmy, though, for
one day.
Jimmy Brown fans and collectors.
I know, one day, but
Obscura.
So that went back to Frontline, and the A&R guy just looked at it and goes, he listened and he just started laughing, and he goes, "These are the worst Bowie ripoff songs I've ever heard, done with terrible, terrible production." And I'm like, that's the guy you hooked me up with, you know? And I go, well, we could rewrite the songs. And they were just like, no, you know what? Why don't you just concentrate on what you're doing? Then the What a Joke debacle came about. And then, you know, that happened. And it was met with horrible reviews. You know, people were shipping it back. You know, it was bad. And then me and George ended our relationship and musically. And then I went to Frontline and I said, well, can I do my solo project now? And they said, no. And I said, well, I want to sit down with Terry Taylor. They're like, for what? And I go, to produce the next Deliverance record. And they're like, he's already said no. And I go, I want to sit down with him. I want to sit and talk with him. So they arranged a meet. We met on the beach. And we walked, we talked, and then we went back to his car. And first of all, he thought I just did a bunch of homework on him and that I really wasn't a fan. But I'd been listening to him since I was 10, and he didn't believe me. So we went back to the car and I played him some demos that I had made, First Day of Execution. And he listened to it. And then I played him my solo stuff and said, this is what I really wanted you to produce. And he listened to that. And he's like, wow. He goes, you have a very different vocal approach. It's super Bowie-esque. It's blah, 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 blah. And he's like, put on the other one. So I put on the Deliverance, you know, and he said, why not mix that with this? Now he goes, make it like David Bowie joined Metallica. I'm like, that won't work. And he goes, well, let's find out.
Oh,
And he handed me his hand and said, "I'll produce your album." And
wonderful.
we went into the studio, and Stay of Execution happened.
I dream of you and unrequited love, the lies, the truth in what once was. And through it all, I see at last the Savior's hand in all that's past. Faith gathered from once was, hope gathered from once was, peace gathered from once was, love gathered from once was.
After that began my relationship with Terry and Gene. You know, I just started working with them. We went in to do Learn, and then went in to do River. And those are, like, for me, the 3 pinnacle records of my career, you know, and just had so much fun working with them. And I'll never forget when because by this time I'd already acquired a 16-track studio in my house. I finally was able to buy a house and do all that, and built a studio immediately. And I written the entire Camelot record. And I called Terry and I said, "Hey man, I'm ready to do another album." And 21. And then Terry, I meet with Terry like we always did. That was a ritual. We just went and met on the beach and talked and hung out. And he listened to it, and he just said, he goes, "Listen, I wouldn't mind the payday. I'd be glad to take your money." But he goes, "You don't need me anymore. You've learned what you've learned." He goes, "These demos show it." And I went in to record as producer, and I was scared. I mean, I was scared. And the album turned out miserable as a result, because you could hear that I was afraid. I had so much better recordings from my home studio than what we did in the studio. And I almost wanted to beg them to re-release, or to release those demos versus what happened in the studio. But what happened, and it was done. And
Which album was this, Jimmy?
Camelot and Smithereens.
It was a very good album.
I just didn't. It was uncohesive. There were some things that were missing. Camelot 21 fixed it.
Yeah, well, why don't we talk about that, Jimmy? I was down on my list, but I know that you said you weren't happy with the original, and you're kind of giving us some details about that. You just were nervous about producing it yourself, and I know there were some issues with the record company too. They were rushing you to make it, weren't they?
Yes. Well, there was a little bit of a rush, but the biggest problem was this was the age of, remember, everybody getting sued for sampling.
Okay.
And I had taken my entire movie collection at that time on VHS, and I had created all that dialogue that's on 21 with people's voices. I was like taking from Godfather, taking from, When a Man Loves a Woman, and taking from the Maltese Falcon, and taking from, dude, it took me, I can't even tell you how long it took me. I remember going days without sleep, finding all the right dialogue to put it into this motif. And they heard it and they said, "Wow, that's brilliant. And that must have took a long time for you to do, but we can't release it. We'd have to get all these movie studios." And they're like, "How many movies did you use?" And I'm like, "I don't know, maybe like 60. And they're like, "If you can't," they're like, "We can't do that. We're gonna have to pay all them and blah, 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 blah." And it's like, "You're done." And I'm like, "No, well, we could do something to disguise the voices." And he's like, "Well, if you do that, then there's no point. Why don't you guys just do it all yourselves?" I'm like, "No." And there was no budget. I didn't know at that time, see, because I had left Frontline to do River Disturbance. And when they made me an offer to come back, and I didn't know, they literally, the check they cut me to come back was like borrowed money. I didn't know that they were on their last leg, because they were not on their last leg when I had signed with them originally. They were the kings of the Christian music empire at that time in 1989 when I signed with them. But by 95, they weren't giants anymore. They quickly shrunk, and I didn't know. So I mean, yeah, it was bad at the end, and they didn't have any money, you
Do
know.
you think, Jimmy,
Well-
that was because of the advent of grunge, maybe, that came along, and so
Yeah, and they had concentrated so much on metal, and they didn't get any grunge bands, which they should have, and all bigger artists left. Shout was gone. Kenny Tamplin had gone. John Gibson, he was gone. Gospel Gangsters, they were stupid enough to let them go. And I mean, because that record blew up, dude.
Yeah.
And but they were scared of it because of all the, the cussing, and it's like, it's a rap record. What are you going to do? And they're trying to reach their community, so it works for them. But yeah, it was just, I think, a lot of bad decisions on their part. Plus, the three main dudes who headed up the thing kind of, there was a lot of politics and swindling and weird stuff that happened. And I went from working with all these pro execs to a bunch of interns. When I came back, I was just like, who are these people? I mean, it was weird. It was sad, and it was weird,
Well, and I know that you wanted to do that kind of more what you had in mind, and you did like a crowdfunding campaign for that, and somehow I missed that. And then could you give us more details about like how the Redux version then, kind of came into being? I know Matt Hunt had a lot to do with that too.
I'll tell you right now, Matt Hunt is the savior of that project. Him and Adele Meisenheimer, but primarily Matt really came in and saved the day. I think at Adele's behest. But so we did the crowdfunder. We only came in 30%, under 30%. And then we did a second crowdfunder, and it was even worse. And it was like, God, man, I guess people didn't like this album. I don't know what it is. But I had already booked the studio time. I'd already paid for everything up front. And now that it was supposed to be John Knox, and it was, I was going to use my Eraserhead band, and then it just all started falling apart from the get-go. And it just took forever to do. And finally, when we moved here to Vegas, I'd had an illness and needed to do surgery, and I ended up selling basically everything I owned to pay for it. And my gig at the studio, they weren't paying me the last 6 months that I was there. So it was just a bad situation. And that's how we ended up back here in Las Vegas. But when we came, I had nothing. And I'd been struggling with depression on and off, pretty much since my early 20s. But I fell into a real bad one when we were here. And but I got to work, and I really wanted to do music again. And then some weird health issues started happening here again. And I don't want to get too far into it, but my best friend Kevin just felt horrible, didn't he? And he lived way on the other side. He lives in Vermont or Virginia, and he had relocated there. And he just sent me a MacBook. Said, what guitars do you need? What bass do you need? What do you need to start recording? Be modest, but let me know what you need. And so he hooked me up with all the stuff I needed to get going. And then I had another friend, her name is Muse, and she just opened my Patreon for me, and she sent me all the passwords and everything else. And I told her I don't want to do it. And she really, like, because I don't want to sit and beg people for money and all this other stuff, because I couldn't work basically, and I wasn't getting disability. So she said, every artist has had to have a patron from the days of Beethoven, Mozart, Picasso, Da Vinci. Everybody had patrons, and this affords your fan base and even new people that have never heard of you to become a patron and to support you. So, and this enables you to do your art without worrying about how to keep the lights on. So as that started to grow, You know, I started with 3 patrons, her being one, so literally just 2. And then I started promoting it a little here and there. I've never been good with social media, so, you know, and when I did, I get criticized because I post stupid pictures of, you know, dog smoking and all this other stuff, you know. It's just you know, you know, I kept growing it, and you know, I steadily stay between 80 and 90. I don't know why it doesn't grow beyond that, and I think a lot of it is because I just don't promote it. But I should, because I really want to grow it to. I mean, like Terry's got like 500 people on his, and he's doing okay. You know, people think I'm making thousands and thousands. Like I'll shoot straight with you. I'm not. But it's enough to keep the lights on. And that's why I always tell my patrons every month, thank you. You paid my electric bill, man. You have no idea how incredibly grateful I am. So, but yeah, man, I, you know, started that and doing that. It was a lot of fun to work on with what I'm doing. Where was the origin of the question?
The history of Camelot Redux.
Cam.
And
Okay,
how
yeah,
that
going
came
back to Cam.
There's still a rise, always true. Empty bars and baby roots. Now it's both we can stop. A wild fight just left me lost. Where are you? Oh, where are you?
Going back to Cam. So in the midst of doing all that, Kevin had provided me with everything, and then I started talking to Manny. Well, Manny and we never stopped talking, but you know, I started telling him, you know, I've got to finish Camelot, and he started finding other band members and finding other players, and now everything was being done remotely. And then I shared with my patrons, and told them, you know, I've run out of money. I need help. And for voice actors, people in the UK and Russia and everything else just started saying, we'll be your voice actors. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So I started having them talking to their phones and send me audio clips, and I would send them the dialogue, and then I would rewrite dialogue and then have them send it again. And I mean, so the ball started rolling. It started going, and the music took a while because I had 3 drummers commit to me, and then all of them bailed on me. I mean, without even a word, without even a sorry, or, you know, that really upset me. So, then Phil Barrero came into the picture, who plays with Lust Control, and he plays in my solo band. So, and we were able to complete everything and fix it and finish it. And there's also some drum programming and stuff on it that goes along with it. But, you know, it was finally done, but now I had no way of putting it out. I had no way of, because it was going to cost a lot. And Adele calls me, Adele from Frontline. She calls me every couple of months just to check in. You know, she's a really good friend, has been a long time, and a good steward of my catalog. And so she calls, and I you know, because I hold everything in. I'm not going to tell you. I mean, I you know, whenever I've got bad troubles, I hold it all in. I barely even unload on my wife, and I just hold it all in. But that one day I just let loose, and she just said, I have an idea. I'll get back with you. And then Matt Hunt came into the picture, and Matt and I talked, and I shared everything with him, and he's like, I'm going to release it. And but in doing so, I had to sign all the rights over to him. So I told him, okay, well, by signing all the rights over to you and everything else, here's the patrons, or the people that donated to it, and you're going to have to fulfill all the orders. And he's like, no problem. And he did it. And I was happy. I was real happy with the release. It didn't happen the way I thought it was going to. I wanted an actual book, but it didn't turn out like that. And you know, I don't know if you've seen it. Well, yeah, you have Camelot 21 right there, but I
Yeah.
mean, you pull
Yeah.
the booklet out. It's so small. Not even the magnifying glass on my phone works. I mean, it's too much. I mean, you know, but whatever. I mean, like I said, it was supposed to be an actual booklet, but I know that would have ran him a lot of money.
Yeah. It was nice, Jimmy.
Those are just the lyrics right there. Those are just the lyrics. That's not the book.
Yeah, I
Right.
have the deluxe edition, Jimmy. I don't have it on me, but it has, like you said, the booklet is super thick and the writing is fairly small, but mine even has a DVD of you guys doing stuff in the studio and that.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. Production-wise, Jimmy, I'm gonna say this. It is like so close to Operation Mindcrime. It's crazy. I mean, you could play those either one, and I think they're right there production-wise, Jimmy. You did a super job on that.
Thank you.
For that. And my wife even likes it. I was playing it this morning and she's like, that's really good. And I'm like, it is. This album is awesome. So I really like the Redux version.
Thank you, man. That actually means a lot to me because a lot of work went into it, put it that way.
Right, right.
Manny listened to the whole thing. It was all done. And he called me and he's like, dude, you know, you outdid yourself. This is unbelievable.
It's A+, Jimmy. I'm serious. It's A+.
And I said to myself, all right, you know, it stinks is probably, you know, 10 years from now, you know, God willing, at age 64 or 63 or whatever, I'll probably want to redo it again. It still didn't turn out the way I it, but you know what? And I hadn't listened to it in a year, and I put it on, I'd say about 3 months ago, and I'm like, okay, this turned out cool. This turned out really good, and I don't mind the Mindcrime references because you know, it's funny. The Wall is more of what I think of when I think of conceptual records.
Okay.
But and Wish You Were Here, but I love Mindcrime. There's no question that record is just brilliance from start to finish. You know, so the fact that people liken it to that to me is just brilliant, you know, because I don't think it's of that caliber, but I'm glad people do like it.
It's right. It's right there, Jimmy. Let me tell you, I think it's right there. You're right, real close. And
Thank
another big news, Deliverance is going to be playing at part 1 of Immortal Fest this July 22nd and 23rd. What can you tell us about that? Who's going to be there? What band members will be in the band playing there, Jimmy?
Oh, it'll be my long time, you know, it's funny, Jim, he's officially been Deliverance's drummer for 10 years, but he's unofficially been our drummer since 1989 or 1990, because when Chris Hyde first left, a lot of people don't know, rest in peace, I love you, Chris, you know, but yeah, he left us in the middle of a tour, and I mean, like, just flew home, and so if it wasn't for Jim, you know, I called, you know, because I met Jim in '85 when I started the band, and it was right when he started Crucified. So that's we just been friends since then. If he didn't know the songs, man, we would have been screwed to finish the tour. But he came in and he just became an honorary member from that point on. Anytime I mean, oddly enough, like when we played Cornerstone in 1993, Chris Hyde didn't make the plane, and you know, now he had a good reason then. Because his wife went into labor and he just couldn't leave, you know, I get it. But he didn't even let us know. We had to call and find out. but Jim just happened to be at Cornerstone. Crucified wasn't there. Nobody, he wasn't playing. And we borrowed Joey's kit from Believer, and Jim just played the show, bailed us out. So Jim's just been an honorary member. So Jim Chaffin, of course, our original guitar player, Glenn Rogers, will be playing. He's been back with the fold with Deliverance since 2018, 2018. Victor's no longer with us, so it's Manny. Manny's right back with where he belongs. He's back with us, He's in my solo project, but he's also in Deliverance,
So I'm assuming you maybe have a pretty good idea what the set list is going to be, and can you give us any details? And if you don't want to share, that's fine too. Any kind of surprises song-wise that we might be hearing there, or
just Deliverance songs.
Okay.
Ask me if I'm going to play a song, and I'll say yes or no.
Well, that'll be good that way. I think we'll just leave it at that, and it'll be a surprise for everyone then when they're there.
I will say this: there was talks about us changing up the tried and true. Since 1992, we've been opening every concert with one song.
Okay.
Stay of Execution.
Right. Okay.
So all these years later what is it? That was 92. So it's 31
years ago. Yeah.
31 years ago. So every Deliverance show always opens with Stay. And so we all sat and talked, should we change it up? Should we change it up? So we were thinking, let's open with Flesh and Blood. Let's open up with Bring 'Em Down. Let's open with Belltown. And man, I just, after all was said and done, I called Manny and I said, put Stay as the opener. To me, it's just the opener, it's like, it's got all the energy and, and everything else. But yeah, from that point on, we go down, we give you early Deliverance, we give you mid Deliverance, and we give you ladder, so it's going to be a nice mix of both. I wanted to put Not Too Good for Me in the set because that's one of my favorite songs off Camelot.
Yeah.
And but for whatever reason, I don't know, Jim just has a little trouble with the timing of that song. And it's my fault because I wrote it like that. I wrote it stupid as far as timing, That's
how can I write a song that would be hard for Jim? No.
Yeah. It's it's funny because Mason, when he was recording it, he yelled at me. I mean, he's like, "This doesn't make sense." I'm like, "Yes, it does. Totally makes sense because I hear it right here. So whatever I hear here, I'm going to have to translate it. So Manny worked with him, and he pulled it off. But Jim's having a little bit of problems. Well, I remember we played it live with Kevin Lee once, and oh my gosh, he wrecked it. I mean, he wrecked it so bad that I turned around and I went and kicked a hole in his kick drum. I was so mad at him. Oh, dude, if you guys knew the temper I had as a kid, man, I literally don't know how Chris Hyde stayed with me. Or Brian Carilla and Glenn, as a matter of fact, back in those days, because, I drilled Chris. I'll never forget. Chris never listened to secular music. He didn't know any secular music. The last thing he listened to before he became a Christian was Green Man Alicia and Judas. Okay. That was his thing. So I'll never forget when I started bringing the heavy, fast stuff. And it was 1985, and he's like, who plays like this? That's people are going to look dumb when I'm going ding, 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 ding on the ride. And I go, are you kidding me? I go, listen, man, I'm 50 years old, all juiced up, and I'm like, I'm going to make you the Dave Lombardo of Christian. And he stays quiet and he kind of like sighs and goes, who's Dave Lombardo? And I just started laughing, but I think lo and behold, I did. I mean, but I drilled Chris. I drilled him and drilled him. But like, if he couldn't get his double kicks like to sound like a helicopter,
I don't want to be alone.
we were rehearsing at this place, and I don't even know how we ended up there. It was just the creepiest place. But when you opened the front door to this shed we were rehearsing in, it like immediately started sloping, just downhill. And I mean, we'd have to like hike to get to the room. It was weird. And he was making me so mad because I was writing Victory at the time, and and I grabbed one of his kick drums, kicked open the door, and I like rolled it down the hill. I'm so embarrassed of it now, but I mean, it was like a scene out of a cartoon. And another time I was so mad, we had just drywalled. I mean, Brian Carilla spent like 3 days drywalling our studio, and I was so mad about a part not being right that I was playing a flying V at the time. I grabbed it like a spear and I just boom, put it right into the wall, and it just stuck right into the drywall. And I left it there. Brian went to go take it down. I go, leave it there. It's a reminder. It's a reminder to all of you. I want this played right. I mean, dude, they were all in their 20s and they were letting this 15-year-old brat just, run amok. I mean, I still don't know how they did it.
He was like, we better get this Christian song right, or else.
Oh man, dude, I had a temper when it came to the music. I mean, when it came to the music, I had a temper because I wanted it right, and
That's awesome.
it was just, I've just believed in the live show should be as pro as the bands we're playing with. Because I mean, we do, and I go back and I look at flyers of our shows, opening for Armored Saint, opening for Dark Angel, opening for Testament, opening for weirdly enough, Jane's Addiction. All these bands were tight, man, and sounded great. And I wanted us to go. It's like I told them, what an embarrassment to us if we're a Christian band and go out there and sound like poop. It's just an absolute embarrassment. And I go, no, it's not going to happen. To me, that's what made Stryper so special for me. Because I was a fan of Rez. I was a fan of DA. I was a fan of Servant. I was a fan of, I used to go to all those shows. But when I went, I couldn't believe how hokey the shows were. 2 floodlights and somebody standing on a ladder putting colored gels in front to change it up. I mean, that's how bad the shows were. And then all of a sudden, here comes Stryper in '83 with that, those, the No 66 and No Devil and, the Stryper big sign and everything's lighting up and their cabinets and the yellow and black attack. And I was like, and not to mention, they sounded unbelievable live. And this is the day before tracks,
right,
that everybody's using. And I mean, they just sounded unbelievable. And that they were honestly, seeing them is what drove me, because if you watch Metallica live, they are horrible. You can't believe you're watching the same band that's on the album. And it's mostly due to Lars, I mean, no offense. I mean, I've met Lars twice in my life and he's a really nice guy, but I don't know what happens to him live. It's like, man, you suck.
Well, will you be doing a somber at the Immortal Fest? I love that song.
Oh, I love that song too, but probably not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think if Not Too Good for Me doesn't come on.
Okay.
I don't think anything from Camelot's going to play.
Okay.
Part of it is the set. We were given 1 hour.
Yeah.
And and I even told the guy when he was booking us, it's like, dude, you contacted a band with 11 or 12 studio records and a 30+ year history. In fact, Deliverance actually in 2025, we will be 40 years old. Think about that. 4 decades, man. And all these studio albums, it's hard to kind of chronicle that big of a catalog into 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And we're talking a tight 60 minutes because they want intro and encores in that 60 minutes. So I'm like, how in the world do we like chronicle our entire catalog? So it's kind of like picking all the concert favorites.
Sure.
The Call has always been a concert.
Yes.
No Time has always been a concert favorite. You know, with everybody doing the hey, no. You know, I mean, everybody loves Weapons. If I leave a show without playing Weapons, somebody's gonna yank me, hang me on a tree. So I'm gonna make sure that they'll get Weapons. So you know, and like I said, Stay and off of River. We wanted to play a couple songs off River, but we just chose one, Belltown, because it's just such a great fun
song.
Right.
Well, you can always open, Jimmy, with Cheeseburger Make Her Do and close with Pray.
Oh, I know exactly.
That'll compact it.
That'll compact it right there. Yeah, I mean, even the intro, I had a great intro planned, you know, since they have big video screens and everything else. And but I started to record it, and it was like, oh, this is 3 minutes, and that's like a song, you know? So it's like, maybe we shouldn't do the intro. And I'm like, God, but I don't want to just walk out there and, hi, how's it going? You know, I mean, I'd like to do a pro show. And Manny and Jim and Glenn, actually, they're all about it. I mean, if I had my way, I wouldn't even rehearse. I'd just show up to the show. Hey, how's it going? And just go out there and play. You know? But those guys are the sticklers. I mean, they're like, you know, they had to force me for next week's rehearsals that we're having all week and here in Vegas. You know, because me, I'm just kind of a happy-go-lucky. I show up and, you know, hey, what's going on? How you doing? You know, and talk my crap and ask them, where can I smoke? You know, so.
What kind of idea has been planted in the mind? When stealing babies and killing your folks on your spots on prime time. There we go. One more time. There we go.
Well, growing up, was music an important part of your life? What instrument did you start with? Did you start playing guitars first? Who were some of your musical influences? Just all that sort of information.
Yeah, music was very pinnacle it was always in my house. We didn't watch TV. We listened to music, and we had the old good old 1957 Sylvania console stereo with tubes and 15-inch JBL speakers in it. I mean, it was the real deal. My dad bought it in 1957, and that console lasted. You know, in fact, my nephew has it. My mom gave it to my nephew before she passed, and he's restoring it and babying that thing. But it had a turntable and a radio. That's it. So, but it was loud and sounded rich and smooth and just beautiful. So, as all the kids, I'm the baby. So I'm 12 years from my oldest sister, 9 years from my brother, and 5 years from my the youngest sister. So I'm the baby of the family. So by the time I was, 4 or 5 years old, they had already, they were all older, but everybody got turntable time. But my mom always played, anything from Spaniard music to her favorite, which was Elvis Presley. So I grew up on Elvis, man. In fact, you're looking at a guy who was actually at an Elvis show. I don't remember it because I was 3 years old, but I went to come see Elvis here in Las Vegas at the International Hotel when he was here, and 2 concerts. And but like I said, I don't remember it. I was a baby. But that story's funny though, because my mom said I was just asleep in her lap, because back then, you ate dinner, watched the comic, and then Elvis comes out. And she said I was asleep in her lap the whole time because I slept all the time. And she said, but right when the music, bum, ba-dum, 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 bum, 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 I got up and I just sprung to life in her lap, and guys were fixed at the stage. And as soon as the curtain went down, I fell out again. But yeah, I was all about Elvis, man. I entertained the family every Sunday with the broomstick, and and doing all the Elvis moves, and I knew the Jailhouse Rock, and all the whole dance sequence, and Elvis is huge, gigantic influence. But my sister Julie was really into current disco, R&B, all that stuff, but she loved Zeppelin. She loved my brother, it was all about Zeppelin and Bowie and stuff like that. And Pearl, my other sister, was Bowie or Aerosmith, or and for me, when my time came, it was Bowie, Kiss, and Neil Young. So we had this wide range. And in fact, my brother, last time he was here, I finally confessed to him after 45 years, almost 50 years, because I'll be 54 this year. Because he'd accused my sister of stealing all his, and it was me. I was taking all his 8-tracks, and I took his Kiss 8-track. I took his Zeppelin 3, 4, Houses of the Holy, and Physical Graffiti. I stole his Neil Young, Rust Never Sleeps. I stole his almost anything Bowie, but I see most of those were in his car. All his Bowie 8-tracks were in his car, so he didn't he was very, very safe to keep those, because he's a big Bowie fanatic too. And but I stole all his 8-tracks, and I just loved it. And the first thing I wanted to learn was drums, and I did. And but the drum, I came home, the drum set was gone, so my dad replaced it with a bass. So so I had to go to bass, and then that was gone. And my brother was playing in a band. This is pre-Christian days, and he was playing in a band called Middle Earth. They were a local dorkball band that played around, and I'll never forget their business card. It was so dorky. It just said Middle Earth, from rock to disco, and then my brother's name, Charlie Brown, and call him, to book them. His name's Charles. He goes by Chaz, but we just call him Charlie. Anyway, so him and his band had a rival band they played with that they hated, right? As we all do. For us, for Deliverance, it was Vengeance. So we loved them as guys, but we hated them as a band. So the guitar player of that band worked 2 summers to buy a Gibson Les Paul Custom or something like that, and they stole it. My brother and his band stole it.
Oh man.
And so they ended up storing it when they realized, well, we can't ever do anything with this thing because they're going to know it was us that stole it. So while they were trying to figure out what to do with it, and they were all loads, man, all they did was get high and practice. So they were high all the time. So, I mean, that weed smell was a very familiar smell from the time I was 2-3 years old on. So, but they hid the guitar under my bed, and it stayed there for many years till I pulled it out one day and started teaching myself how to play. And my brother came home. This is when I was 11, and I'd already been playing it for several years. And my brother came home to talk to my mom, and nobody was home. It was just me. And he walks into my room and he sees me playing. And he's like, "Where did you get that?" I'm like, "You left it under my bed years ago." He's like, he goes like, how do you know how to play all this stuff? I'd already been teaching myself. And I'll never forget, he packed up the guitar in the case and he took it. And I'm like, what a jerk. But he went to my dad, and I heard him tell my dad, because my dad had just gotten home, and he was like, you need to buy Jimmy a guitar and an amplifier. And he's like, why? He doesn't know how to play. And he's like, he goes, Dad, I've been playing since I was 14, and he's better than me. He's really, really good. You need to buy him a guitar and an amp. And he did. 6 months later, he bought me a really horrible guitar. I mean, even then as a kid, I knew, God, I had a really nice guitar, and now I'm playing on this dime store piece of junk, but it worked. And yeah, guitar became my main focus. I was forced to do vocals. I was playing with this really dorky band called Metal Image when I was 13. And we went to this show that we were playing at a Catholic church bazaar, and we were opening with Number of the Beast. I thought that was kind of funny. But our singer didn't show. Just nobody knew where he was. So we later found out he was getting beat up in an alley. Somebody stole his bike. So I know it's kind of mean to laugh about it, but he was kind of a turd anyway. But so I was the only one who knew the lyrics, so they forced me to sing. And there I am, 13 years old, trying to play and sing, and it was a nightmare. But after that, I that was when I caught the thing. You know, I'd already been mimicking Elvis and Bowie and, you know, so much, and tried to Plant, could never do it. I don't know anybody who can sing like Robert Plant. Yes, it's just so music was very pivotal. To watch my brother's band, I'll tell you how important music was. To watch my brother's band, because we had a nice little house, and in the back there was the detached garage. Behind the garage was a mother-in-law house. Well, that was my brother's room. And when you walked in, it was just one big band set up in a bathroom, and his bed was in the corner, you know? So his band just rehearsed there. But to gain entrance to watch them play, I had to stick my head in the bass drum and let them just beat it mercilessly until they thought I would say, okay, enough. But I did it so that way I could stay in the room and watch them practice. And all I would do is I just watched every single one of them. And the guy's his guitar player, one of my favorite guitar players of all time to this day, named Siegfried Hufnagel, German guy, Ziggy Hufnagel. And man, Ziggy, he could rock. He was just a great guitar player. And when I first met Larry Farkas, that's who he reminded me of, which they reminded me of a guy who I'd been long listening to named Earl Slick. And Larry was a mix of Earl Slick and Ace Frehley for me, you know? And then you throw in the Robin Trower with the wah pedal and Pat Travers, and, you know, yeah. So my all-time favorite guitar player to this day, believe it or not, is still Larry Farkas.
Interesting.
He's a great one.
Well, and I know I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Jimmy, but I want to make it easy for you. I know you're a super huge Bowie fan also. What would you say would be your 3 favorite Bowie albums? If you had 3 you could pick, which ones would it be? Is that too hard?
That's a tough one, because the thing I love about Bowie is that every record was so different from one another.
Yes.
I mean, he had a few that were kind of like sprinkles of each other, you know, like young Americans into Station to Station. There were sprinkles. A Space Oddity going into Hunky Dory, there were sprinkles. But then you go into Man Who Sold the World, and that's Bowie's heavy metal album, and that's a brilliant record. And then you cross over into, you know, Ziggy Stardust, and then it's like that's the essence of punk rock being birthed right there, and glam rock. and then you go into pinups, and you go into it just changes. And then Diamond Dogs, which is the album that changed the world for me, because that was the first Bowie album I received.
Okay.
I'll tell you that story. Yeah, I've said it a zillion times, and I know people are sick of hearing it from me, but I don't care. I love the story. So, but let me give you my 3 first.
Okay.
If I'm pressed and I had to say, okay, Desert Island, you're only allowed 3 records. Okay, Hunky Dory.
Okay.
Hunky Dory's definite, an absolute must. Heroes, absolute must. And the third one is gonna be tough, but I want to choose from the latter. I want to choose from his latter work. So I'm going to say The Next Day. I love that album. I absolutely love that album. But if truly hard pressed, man, those are my 3. If hard pressed, but it's hard to choose because I just love every single one of his records.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. He did make some stinkers. Let's Dance. I know it's commercially marketable,
right,
all this other stuff, but he himself said it wasn't his record. It was Nile Rodgers' record, which I'm a Nile Rodgers fan, so I like it.
Right.
But it is a Nile Rodgers record with Bowie singing on it. And then the album that came out after that, which was called Tonight, Blue Jean was a cool song. That's about it. And then he did the Buddha of Suburbia soundtrack, which was kind of cool. But then he put out an album called Never Let Me Down. And yeah, he let me down. There's only one song on there that's really cool called Zeros, and I really love that. But you could tell he was lamenting himself at that time. Especially there's one line on there that he says, "And me, my little red Corvette has driven by."
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I'm not that creative force anymore. Prince is now.
Mhm.
And it was almost like he was passing the baton, and it's actually a very sad line. When I remember when I first read it, when listening to it, I actually kind of got a little weepy because I was like, yeah, dude, you used to be this creative monster, and now you're letting this midget from Minneapolis do it. Rest in peace. Huge Prince fan, by the way. I always call Prince the Black Bowie, because that's what he is to me. He's just a genius, genius songwriter and singer. His singing and his guitar playing, which he never got really a lot of notice for.
No, he did not.
But he's a genius, just period, the end. But I was just mad that the creative side of Bowie was gone because he had signed that ridiculous deal with EMI. And, but, things happen, and he ended up going back with Brian Eno and writing that unbelievable album Outside, and Parts Filthy Lesson came out, and, he wanted to show all the newbies that he still had it, and boy, he did, because that's a great album. And then Earthling, oh my gosh, I forgot about that album right now, and that's a Desert Island album, because man, all the jungle rhythm and the electronica tech influence on that record, unbelievable stuff. In fact, I did a cover of Dead Man Walking for my Patreon. If you're not a member, I gotta send you some of that stuff. It's cool. Okay. Diamond Dog Story, real quick.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm a 5-year-old with 3 very older, mean siblings. So my sister Pearl, the one closest to me, 5, she was my sweetest, and Julie was actually like a second mom to me. But they had their moments of evil, let's torture the child, because I know I got on their nerves, because I didn't really talk very much, but when I did, it was annoying. And so I get it. So it was right when Big Gulps came out, from 7-Eleven, those cups, So they went and they had a cup, because everybody would get it and then save it and then go to 7-Eleven and refill it and, pretend like they already had it and, all this, my family was notorious for that. But so we had the Big Gulp cups. So my parents were gone for the weekend, and they had to watch me, and they were always annoyed at the fact that they had to watch me. So they decided to pour an entire bottle of prune juice in the Big Gulp cup. and told me, drink it. And if you do, Julie will take you to Zodi's, which Zodi's was like the target of our, for SoCal, for Southern California. It was like the target. But she'll take you to Zodi's and buy you any toy you want. And I go, oh, okay. And it looked like soda. So I started to drink it. And it was like, you know, and they're like, you can't spit it up. You have to drink it. So all three of them watched me drink it. And after a couple hours in the toilet, you know, and all this other stuff, you know, Julie made good on her promise. She took me to Zodi's. And we're walking down the toy aisle straight ahead. I see it, you know, and then, but you have to walk past the records, you know, all the albums, and my eyes just zeroed in on it. There was an orange sticker in the corner, and it said new release, and it said on sale $199 or $299 or something like that. And it was Bowie Diamond Dogs, and I just veered and walked over there, and Julie yells at me, where are you going? And I went over and I picked it up. I'm just staring at it, and she's like, put that back. And I go, no, I want this. I thought you wanted a toy. No, I want this. She's like, I can't buy that for you. I'm like, why? She goes, Dad will kill me. That guy's a fag. And I'm like, well, what's that? And she's like, oh, never mind. She's like, if I do get it for you, you have to hide it. And if Dad finds it, you can't tell him I bought it for you. I said, yeah, that's fine. So brought it home, put it on my teeny little turntable there in my house and in my room, and got completely lost. And that was it for me. You know, all the songs were great, but the one I'll never forget, track 2, Sweet Thing. Just hearing the piano and then that voice, it's safe in the city. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that voice. I want to sing like that. And yeah, it's just like, yeah, I mean, dude, I was 5. This was 1974.
Yeah.
And that's how much of an impact. I mean, all these years, I mean, gosh, and it's funny, I still put that on, I still listen to that song, and I still get the stupid goosebumps and still remember hearing it. I immediately go back, you know, and to that. But see, whenever I went to go see Bowie, you know, like at Dodger Stadium, you know, 20, 30 years later or whatever, I wasn't looking for him to play Sweet Thing. I wanted him to, you know, that. Now I'm going to go off on a tangent because that's what bothers me about today. It's like, you got to appreciate the artist and where they're at. But what I loved about Bowie is how he just constantly evolved. But I have to tell you that's my prune juice first Bowie album story. And it was worth every moment on the turlet. So there you go.
Well, it's something a little bit more serious now. Could you tell us your journey to Christ and how that began?
Oh, well, here's the real simplicity of it. I grew up in a house that was very, I guess, if official religion in our household, it was Catholicism. But my mother and her family dabbled in what's called Santeria. Mm-hmm. So, which is a mix of Catholicism and voodoo. So, but nonetheless, you know, so I grew up knowing rituals and knowing different. And so spiritism and spiritual things were very, you know, anything of the esoteric was very heavily in my house. Very aware of spirits and all that stuff. So now my brother converted to Christianity. when I was about 9 or 10. He was invited to Calvary and, gave his heart to Christ and came home and told everybody about it. And everybody told him he was a nutcase, get away from me, that kind of thing. We're Christians, we are Christians. And he's like, no, you guys aren't. And so this went on for, I don't know, a month or two, I guess, with that. And then he found a Spanish church because my mom started asking more and more questions. And but she didn't want to go to Calvary Chapel because she'd already seen the parking lot and a bunch of hippies and everything else. So she understood English. She just didn't speak it. So found a Pentecostal Spanish church, took her, then she converted. And then my sisters followed. My father never did. I know in his heart, he truly believed. But again, I was 10. So I remember them walking into my room one day. I had posters everywhere. Bowie, Zepp, I had the Hermit poster, the big wall poster that went all the way from the ceiling to the down, the Hermit staring down at the mountain, and they just tore everything off my walls and went through my record collection and just started ravaging everything. And I grabbed 3 albums so they couldn't, and stuck them right in between my mattress and box spring. Diamond Dogs, Low, and Heroes. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they said, this is for your own good, blah, 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 blah. You're not allowed to listen to this music anymore. It's the devil. And I am like, okay, all right, I'm good. It's fine, whatever. So they gave me a Bible. So I start reading it. And I really dig in, man. I just dug in and dug in and dug in. And when I was done, the old, the old saying from Genevieve to Reveille, I went back and forth, and then I started again. And I was like, wow, there's some pretty intense stories in here. I like this. Then I went for a third time. Now, by this time, I'd already been taking notes. Now, I wasn't your everyday 10, 11-year-old. I was already seeing the school shrink because I was reading Friedrich Nietzsche and ditching class, but they always knew where I was. I was in the library, and I would check out books like, S.E. Homo from, anything from Sigmund Freud, Nietzsche, loved Schopenhauer. I was a reader. So the Bible intrigued me, really intrigued me. So, but now I'm having to go to church services with my family. And they sent me once into junior church or children's church. Yeah. And I told my parents, I do not ever want to go back into that nonsense again. They played games and crayons and all this. I'm not learning anything. Can I stay in the adult church with you guys? And they said, sure. So they're there, and we're there one Sunday, and the pastor's saying, it's probably 300 people, the pastor's going off, and, and he said something, and it was wrong. Misquoted the scripture. Oh, so I lift my hand. Mom's like pinching me. Dad's sitting on this side, trying to force my hand down, and I'm like, Pastor. So he stops the service. Yes, young man, and I told him, you misquoted. You said this, and it was actually this. In fact, it's right here, but I memorize it, but it's right here. Now, how can you be a pastor and misquote the scripture? No, he dismissed me. Oh, sweet little boy. Isn't that sweet that a little boy loves the gospel and blah, 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 but, and so, ended up with a bunch of pinch marks and everything else. And I was told by parents, you're going to go back to children's church if you don't learn to control yourself. So I go, okay. So I just went and I stood and I took notes. Every service, just took notes. And I was convinced that every minister was a moron because I was watching all the TBN with my mom, and I heard all these misquoting of scriptures and uncorrelated, unparalleled, and they weren't following the Isaiah school of the prophet principle of precept upon precept, concept upon concept. These guys are taking all this stuff out of context and mushing it together to propagate whatever it is they're trying to sell. And my mom's like, they're not selling anything. I go, yes, they are. And I'm like, but they're not selling Jesus. And they're not even supposed to be selling Jesus. They're supposed to convert people, tell people. Actually, they don't even have to convert them. All they have to do is just say it, because Jesus didn't say anything but to preach the gospel to every creature. And we got into arguments and got into arguments. And they just didn't understand. And now the deacons of the church are trying to cast devils out of me. And they're saying it's remnants of all that rock and roll music I've been listening to. And so I finally told them, and I go, listen, you guys got to understand something. I don't disagree with you. Rock and roll is the devil's music. I go, but here's the thing. If the devil created it, and did he? Yes, absolutely, because that's why it's the devil's music. And I go, well, then that makes the devil, or Lucifer, or whatever you want to call him, Satan, devil. Do you even know what the word Satan means? Yeah, it means devil. No, it does not. It means adversary. So you could be Satan. And, oh yeah, that was the wrong thing to say. So they're trying to cast the devil out of me. A couple times I just, for thrills, I threw my eyes back and everything else. And did all that, I just loved messing with people. So now I'm 11. Believe it or not, this is all in a year's time. And they brought in some preacher from Brazil who spoke Portuguese, but he also spoke Spanish. And he's there, and the whole family's there. Dad, mom, Julie, Pearl, her boyfriend, my brother Charles, his wife Shelley, and me. I'm there, just got my notepad out, I have 3 different Bibles, man. I've got my Thompson's, my Thompson chain, and I got my Jimmy Swaggart Bible College one. I mean, I've got it all, man. And, and I'm just taking notes. And he's up there preaching. He keeps swapping between Portuguese and Spanish. And I understood, that's a little hard, but they're close, And just, dude, out of nowhere. And this is a story I haven't told very many people. He stops. He just stops. And I actually liked this guy. I felt a connection. I felt legit with this dude. And he stops. He throws the microphone down and turns around and tells the pastor loudly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw it down, but I got to do this. And he walks down the aisle. Points right at me. He says, come here. My mom, everybody's like, what's going on? So pulls me up, I'm like, oh, they must have all filled him in. I'm filled with the devil and all this other stuff. You know, I'm ready to cast the devil out of me or whatever. You know, I don't know what's going on in my head at this point, you know. And they pull me up to the front. And he has me turn around and face the audience, and he tells every deacon in the church and the pastor and every elder who's been a Christian for more than 20 years to come up. And he has me kneel. And he says, where's your anointing oil? And he just pours the oil over my head. And he says, God is going to use this little boy to reach hundreds of thousands of people through his music. My brother was the musician. He was the one in the band, not me. And I walked away. I walked back to my seat. I hugged him and I told him, thank you. And I whispered in his ear, but I think you've made a mistake. And I went back. I was a smart ass as a kid, you know, I still am, you know. Went back, and the whole ride home, my dad, my mom, my sisters were all saying, you know, he called the wrong son up because it was Charles, you know, supposed to be Charles. You know, Jimmy doesn't even play anything. Yeah. And then that was 1980, man.
Well, Jimmy,
So for Weapons of Our Warfare, when I first got the news that it had hit 100,000, that moment came back to my head.
So Jimmy, if I may say in an amen to that, you're looking at two people right here. I first heard this. It was a copied demo on cassette in 1987. I met a Penny Hall at a Striper concert, and she sent me this, and I just had a little old cassette. And brother, I'm just 2 years your junior, but I mimicked you, and I can tell you, I mimicked all of your mannerisms that you would do, kind of like your vocal inflections in between, you know, the music. And I think you can see I'm a fan of the Big D.
Okay? Yeah, I guess so.
But what I want to say, you know, and I don't have any favorite albums. I just love your work, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But what I so appreciate from here and even beyond, and then here we get into a little bit more personal introspective. But here, you know, Jimmy, what I appreciate about what this represents through the evangelical years is what I'm trying to say.
Ministry. Yeah, the ministry years. Yeah.
So, Jimmy, you were a vessel. You were a vessel of Adonai, of Hashem, of Yeshua HaMashiach.
Yeah.
Jimmy, he used you. I am one of that 100,000 plus kids. I'm but one, but here we are. And Jimmy, on this, you sang. It's more personal now. It's a little different. But you sang, give me the heart of the nail-torn lover of Yeshua.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, that's my prayer today for me. And I fail every day, but I know his grace is there. But I'm just saying, Jimmy, and Rex and I wanted to have you on because we loved you. And I thank you for ministering to me and being a servant of the Most High God, the true and living God of Adonai. Brother, I love you and I thank you from my heart. You have truly ministered to me, and I mean that.
Close your eyes and listen to the words wisdom from those whose innocence was told. From days of old, now and then, our people cry.
after that day at church, then 5 years later, you do start the band. Could you give us a little bit of history of how that happened? And I know you probably told the story a million times, Jimmy, but just for our viewers, if you could kind of tell us how that all got going, please.
Sure. Well, I my brother had given up music and started pursuing a pastoral career, and he was a youth pastor, and of course, employed me to help. So I did everything from lug the PA system into the annex every Wednesday, and helped organize and helped go and pick up stuff, and all the grunt work he didn't want to do, he used me. It's all good. But I also led worship. So, and I made fun of most of the singers that came to our church. It was a pretty big Pentecostal church, and in fact, for my son, he doesn't believe me because there was a guy named Kenneth McGee that used to come to our church like twice a year. He's an evangelist, and he sang like this. I mean, it was. I mean, to this day, I remember he sang a song called "Gone," and it was "God, Mister needs a rope." Just it sounded like Kermit the and but the hilarious part about it, like my brother was telling me, you don't realize you're training your voice when you're doing all this, and you're learning to sing. So so please, when you sing worship, don't go into those stupid character voices of yours. Just try to sing. So so I started doing that, and I was having a lot of fun. I was enjoying it, and he and I, he plays the piano, and so we forth, and then I ended up getting a keyboard, and I would play the electronic drums along with him, and we just had fun with worship. But I started to get the itch, man. I wanted to play. I wanted to play with a band, and I tinkered around with a couple of secular bands when I was 12 and 13. But that was only because, I thought it was cool that I was 12 and they were all like 17-year-old seniors and were bugging me to play with them, But so I ended up getting a girlfriend who's now my wife, and 35 years just this last Sunday.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
I tell her, I already looked the part, dude. I was like the worst flamboyant dresser. I mean, I had the long hair, but I wore the chains, and I mean, this is a conservative Pentecostal church, 500 people, and everybody knew I was the youth pastor's brother, and I went to church service like this, man. I mean, and it wasn't me being disrespectful. In fact, the senior pastor absolutely loved me and would tell Charles, "Calm down, leave him alone. He's just expressing himself. He's young, and he's an artist. Let him be an artist." So, and it's funny. I love Doug Chambers for that to this day, Pastor Chambers, because of his support towards me. But I put an ad out. In LA, we have a rag called The Recycler, and musicians put their ads out, and people sell their instruments and sell their cars and all sorts of junk. And I put an ad out. It's free, just a Christian guitar player singer looking for a band, and first guy to answer it is Chris Hyde. And he told me, "I just quit my band, Holy Soldier. And, so what kind of music do you do?" And I go, "Well, think Iron Maiden meets Black Sabbath." And he's like, "I'm in. What's your address?" So he comes, and we play, and we're having fun. And it's just like, and because he wanted to play heavy music, not glam rock. And, my brother had a bass player in his band named Alan, who was a longtime family friend. But he was 9 years older than me. And, but he wanted to play. And so he would come and jam with us, and it just didn't work, you know. But so we put another ad out. Now it's me and Chris again. And we'd gone through a guitar player. Actually, we had two guitar players, one named Jim Shireen, and we used to call him Buzzsaw Shireen because his amp just sounded like a buzzsaw. It was just, you know, it was just awful. So now Buzzsaw's gone, and we get this guy named Rick Hoxinger in. He's a Dutch guy, super sweetheart of a dude. And then we need a bass player now, so we go and we put out an ad, and Manny Morales came in, and this is 1985. So now it's me, Manny, and Rick Hoxinger and Chris Hyde. And so, you know, I teach them all the songs that I've got, and you know, we're playing the first song that we played was Deliverance. You know, dun, 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 dun. So we're playing all these jams and we're having fun. And now I admit, especially in my single years, women were an extreme weakness. And for whatever reason, all the girls in the high school, because, you know, I was a rarity. 1985, you know, long hair and dressing the way I dressed, like I was a rock star, and, you know, the spandex pants and or torn jeans with spandex pants underneath, and my jeans had to literally be sewn onto me, and, you know, because I wanted them so tight, and, you know, I was just very flamboyant. You know, I'd wear a red and bright red shoes and white jeans and yellow and black striped tie and a white fedora. You know, I mean, that's the way I dressed, dude. I mean, I definitely took my Bowie and Elton John roots to heart when I was a teenager. But this girl started, I want to be your guys' makeup artist. And she was a little older than us. She was 17. And push comes to shove, so she's doing all our makeup and taking these pictures, and Chris is like, I didn't want to be in another glam band, and I'm like, oh, big deal, let her do it, you know, because she was really cute, she was pretty, so I just, you know, let her do it. And Rick ended up, I guess, knocking her up, so we had to bounce Rick. And so now Rick's gone, and Chris Hyde tells me, I know a guitar player, and he's leaving. He was in my old band, Holy Soldier, and he's leaving. In fact, his last show's this Saturday. We should go hit him up. I'm like, okay. So we go to the Holy Soldier show, and I go there, and there's this guitar player on the side of the stage, literally so far apart from the band, you didn't even know he was in the band. And I'm like, wow, but there's where all the talent is. This guy's smoking. And I look over at Chris and I go, dude, this guy's amazing. What's his name? He goes, Larry Farkas. I go, yeah, we need to talk to him. And so after the show, we play him a couple of garage tapes we made. And he's like, you guys don't need another guitar player. And I'm like, yeah, we do. And he's like, you guys don't need another guitar player. And I go, man, you're done with this band, right? With this Holy Soldier. We called them Holy Bulger because they all wore their Spandos with no underwear. So they all had big bulges. So we called them Holy Bulger. So I go, you're done with we were done with it. I told you I'm unfiltered, man. But he so he's like, okay. And I go, well, then come over to my mom's house and just jam with us and see how it feels. Just see how it feels. And yeah, that was it. He was in the band for 2 years from that point on. And he only left because weird bureaucratic resistance. That's the way I like to call it. Because we didn't want to join Sanctuary. Me and Chris were Pentecostal boys, man. So, you know, we didn't want to be part of no long-haired church and all this. You know, to us, it was like church is church, and what we do musically is our stuff, you know. But, you know, we weren't into metal worship services and all that other stuff. So, you know, it was going to be too hard for us to buy, you know. What you got for me, man?
So out of this sheet of paper, can I ask 4 little questions?
Go ahead.
Okay. Question number 1. I'm a Bowie fan such as yourself. Loved hearing your Starman single. I remember you doing, of course, Beauty and the
Oh,
Beast
yeah. Yeah.
on Camelot. Now, you did the Christmas song. This is not a Bowie song. You did Silent Night, right? On What a
Yeah.
Joke, a great version. Jimmy, have you ever thought about doing the Bowie and Bing mashup, which is so great, of Little Drummer Boy?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And Peace on Earth.
Yes.
Peace on Earth. Can it be? Yeah. Yeah.
That's so great. I just didn't know if you ever thought about that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can really see you doing that.
Yeah, me and Eric Clayton have talked about it, and same with me and Alan. In fact, we all 3 talked about it. We had our own little show for a while called ABC. You know, Guire, Brown, Clayton.
Gotcha.
Didn't do very well, but anyways. But yes, I have thought about it.
Okay, well, I hope to hear that one day. So
Same here.
let me ask another quick question. The beautiful subject matter, and I know I really love this cover. I have on tape the other river disturbance on Brainstorm, but the beautiful subject matter behind You Still Smile, that being, of course, Miss Helen.
Yes.
I was just wondering, Jimmy, and congratulations to you and Miss Helen both on 35 years. That's awesome with a capital A. Has Miss Helen been a rock for you during your life?
No question. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No question. I don't think I'd be here. I mean, seriously, I don't think I'd be here if she has gone through, I don't know, like I said, how much of you guys really just genuinely know my history, but you know, there was bouts with drugs and alcoholism and all sorts of stuff, especially at the demise of Deliverance the first time, because I was just, Deliverance kept me energized and alive, and when it was over, I just fell into deep depression. But yeah, through everything, through thick and thin, it's funny, that song had marked 10 years for us, and now 35 years. Actually,
reaction
this year I would have known her 4 decades, because I met her in 1983. Back of the bus, as I was playing Number the Beast on my ghetto blaster at the back of the church bus. Now, here's the hilarious part. When you flip the other side, it was like Human League and Flock of Seagulls. And, but just to shock everybody, I just loved doing it, and I would cue it up right there. 666, the number of the beast, and I'd walk down right as I'm boarding and press play. Yeah. All right. Everybody all scared of me, So, but I made fun of her. She was sitting right there towards the back, and I look at her necklace. It looked like a bunch of gumballs, and I said, "Are those edible?" She goes, "Excuse me," and I go, "Are those gumballs? Did you make a necklace out of gumballs?" She goes, "No." I go, "Oh, okay." No, I just went. I sat in the back, and then she just kept turning around the whole bus ride and looking at me, And then I said, "Do you want to ask me something?" And so she ended up coming. I go, "Come over," and I patted the seat next to me. So she came over, and yeah, first question I asked her, "What kind of music do you like?" First question.
Well, that's the most important, Jimmy.
And here's her response. She stood quiet and then looked at the ghetto blaster blasting Maiden and goes, that kind. She didn't like metal. She just knew it was important to me. So but yeah. So yes, she, when she first heard it, she was blown away. She couldn't even believe I put it actually on an album. I said, well, why wouldn't I? That just, like I said, that was 10 years, and now here it's 40 years I've known her. And I don't think there's but 2 people on this planet that actually know me, and know everything without any reservation, than her and my best friend Kev. Those are my 2 best friends, So and it's just a trip. It's still. I mean, when we hit this year, especially it was April, and then when we hit April, I told her, "God, we've known each other 4 decades. Is that not the weirdest thing in the world?" And she's like, "Wow, that's really weird." And it just doesn't feel like it, because sometimes, like I said, actually, I don't feel my age until I wake up. So,
Yeah. Tell me about it.
that first swing of the leg out of bed.
Mhm. That first step, it's like, oh,
That's when all of a sudden, oh yeah, I guess I am 54.
yeah. Jimmy, let me ask you really quick then. And by the way, it's a beautiful song. I've known my wife since 1989. We've been married for 22 years, but that song
That's awesome.
speaks to me as I've grown too in life with my wife. And
Oh yeah,
kudos to you and Miss Helen. It's a beautiful song. Thank you for
that line, those lines that that what is it? When I should have been left, you became my sanity when my mind went. If there had been any with a Christ-like spirit, it was you for me. And that still rings true to this very day.
That's wonderful. So
Yeah.
congratulations to you both. And
Yeah.
so on to something maybe a little bit more humorous, but really quick, Jimmy, I've always wanted to know, tell me about Oso and Tiburon, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Wolfie, all the names on some of the albums. Where did those come from?
Sure. That's my name.
Are
Right
you
there.
Oso? Okay.
I'm Oso, yeah. That's my whole family tree right there. And if you look after my son, there's a line drawn. It's like, that's it. Now I got to start one for the grandkids down here. So I got to put my granddaughter's name
There you go.
So, but no, that's my grandmother gave me that name since I was. She called me her little osito, which is oso, which is bear.
Okay.
So her little teddy bear or her little baby bear. So that was my first tattoo. Was my name, my I guess my street name as a kid. Because yeah, because I mean you got to figure. I mean I grew up in the ghetto in L.A. So it was kind of like normal, but and Manny grew up in City Terrace, which was East Los Angeles, and I was born in East Los Angeles. Born in East LA, yeah. So
I remember that.
Yeah, at Lincoln Hospital. I was born at Lincoln Hospital, but we grew up I grew up in Southgate, which is not too far from there. But Manny grew up in City Terrace, which is right there in the heart of East LA, and his street name was Wolfie. So, because he was able to grow a beard from a really young age, like that one kid,
Yes,
that 13 that had a
mustache,
beard, and we used him to buy beer. Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. So, yeah, that was him. So even though he's a 5'5" midget, he was. I always tease him about that. It's only because I'm 6'1", and then no one else had a name. Because they didn't grow up in the streets and all that other stuff. So I gave them their names. And Marcus had a shark tattoo, a tattoo of a big, huge shark on his calf. So I told him, oh, okay, well, we'll call you Tibby or Tiburon, which means shark in Spanish. And so we just called him Tibby. And it's funny because last time I talked to him, which wasn't too long ago, he said that's still his nickname. Everybody still calls him Tibby.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because Chris, all the way up until he passed away, used his nickname I gave him because I called him Alien. And that was and it's funny because it was just a mistake. I always introduced all the band members by their full names. So I would, Glenn E. Rogers or Glenn Eugene Rogers, Brian Don Troy Carilla, and Christopher was Christopher Allen Hyde. But one show, I don't know, in the midst of it all, and I was a big talker and just would take up half our set time talking to the audience, playing games. And I said, Christopher Alien Hyde. I don't know why. And it just stuck. So So yeah, but that's how I just named it. Everybody in the band that came into the band, I gave them all a nickname because it was easier for me to deal with. And guitar players, I always knew they weren't gonna be around very long. So they were like the drummers in Spinal Tap. They just if they weren't gonna implode or explode, I just knew that they weren't gonna have a long stay with us. So.
Oh my goodness. Last question, real quick, Jimmy. During the catalog of Deliverance, I was always pleased to hear, songs that I grew up with, like on the old early songs. You would re-record them from time to time, like Attack, which was on California Metal.
Yeah,
it was on What a Joke and stuff, and and so I, there was the re-recordings of these done, minus Speckled Bird. But A Space Called You, I always loved that song from California Metal.
Yeah.
I kept waiting in the catalog. Why was that one of the only early songs that you never re-recorded, Jimmy?
It's funny. I wanted it, we wanted it on the first album. But Frontline, when they read the lyrics, because they asked to read all the lyrics, Sure. And you know what it is. Now I'll just shoot straight because every pastor I sat under, everybody, dude, yeah, I cuss. I always have, because to me, there's no difference between saying poop or, because God sees it that way. So do you think literally that, he's up there with the checklist? Oh, he said poop. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. He said, that's it. Name's gone. I mean, my gosh, words are words. But so everybody's always known it. But when they met me, I wasn't gonna not be me. Right. And I mean, later I learned how to be professional. Obviously, you don't want to be that turd that just can't, the gutter mouth, Right. So, but yeah, so they demanded to read all my lyrics before. And I go, I would never. And if you followed my career, you will know I have never uttered a profane cuss word or anything in any of my songs. I won't even say damn, because I don't think it's necessary. I don't. Not to relay anything. So like when POD did it and this Christian band did it and that Christian band did it, I was like, oh, because we had to really emphasize what we were feeling. If you can't master the craft of the English language by now, you're a moron. You don't have to use profanity to get it across. In your everyday speech, different story. You still have to respect and remember the fact that kids may be listening to your music. And as much as we all think it's funny when we see the 3-year-old say, we know that it's out of innocence, but that's why we censor ourselves, right? Right. My daughter's going to be 30 this year. She still has not cussed in front of me. Now I've heard her on phone calls without her knowing I'm home, and heard her cussing with Storm, but she won't do it in front of her parents, Right. And I look at that and I say, yeah, because it's just, something that you instill in them. So anyways, I just love ragging on Frontline. And it's funny because Adele owns Frontline, and she's one of my best friends. But yeah, so they would demand to read all my lyrics. They read A Space Called You. Mm-hmm. And they said, I thank my God for loving me. Mm-hmm. So who is this song about? And I go, it's about my girlfriend, and who I'm gonna marry. They're like, yeah, we can't have this song on the album. I'm like, that just makes no sense. It's a love song, and so Space Called You means a girl. And I said, yeah. I go, here's the cool thing about it. And that's with any love song, you know, is the you could be the Lord. The you could be a dog. The you can be, you know, it could be anything. So, you know, don't sweat it. Oh, yeah, we can't have that. I'm like, oh, whatever. So, you know, we kept playing it live. And then it eventually just kind of faded, especially as faster and more aggressive as we started going, because it just wasn't fitting. Just like we used to always play Speckled Bird. You're going to be surprised at this show.
Well, I've often wondered. That was one of my questions. I won't get into it. I had a Speckled Bird question. We'll probably need to do a part 2 sometime, Jimmy. But I want to make sure I understood something correctly. In the song, it says, "I thank my God for loving me."
Yeah.
To me, the context, and I mean, I don't. A space called you. It's to the Almighty. I mean, it's because you're saying, "I thank my God for loving me." I don't understand what their problem was.
No, they just said what it was is that was their cue that, oh, this isn't really about the Lord. This is about a girl. And I said, yeah.
But
so
they, you know, people, the Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon's in the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I understand you, Jimmy.
I didn't understand it. We all got mad.
I love that song.
Especially Chris, because that was actually Chris's favorite song.
I love it.
And you know, it's funny the way it happened, because when we showed up to that, you know, we weren't even the band that was supposed to be on California Metal, because those were all Sanctuary bands.
Oh, okay.
And we weren't invited. But what it was is Vengeance showed up, and the Elefantes took one listen to the band and said, yeah, we aren't recording these guys. Is there anybody else that you want to represent the heavy side of blah, 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 blah? And there was only 2 heavy bands at that time in the Christian scene. It was us and Vengeance.
Yeah.
And so Bob called me, because me and Bob were always cool with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Bob, still love Bob to this day. Still support him. We just didn't want to be a part of the Sanctuary crowd. So yeah, he called and gave us the opportunity, and I said, sure. So we showed up with Victory and Attack. And we go into it, and I'll never forget Dino's first words, man. He goes, man, this is music people murder people by. Okay. And we all just started laughing, you know, we were cracking up, you know, because these are the guys from Kansas, man. This is big, you know? So, but I just started laughing, and me and Dino got along real well. And he just told me, he goes, is there anything that you have that's fast but has like melody that you can sing, you know? And I said, yeah, you know, we have a song, and we played it for him. And right when we played it for him, and he loved the intro, how it starts with, you know, clean guitar, and he's like, wow, he goes, and you could actually sing in your lower register. And he goes, you should always sing like that. And I'm like, well, maybe. And one day, obviously, I did. But yeah, it was so fun. It was just cool, because we had the fast beat, you know. We had a lot of fun with that song. It was one of my favorite songs to play, and Chris, it was his all-time favorite Deliverance song, and it broke his heart when we took it out of the set.
I will leave it with this. That song has actually literally, and remember, I'm 16 years old in 87 when I first heard it.
Yeah.
I'm doing the math right. Yes. Jimmy, that song has literally brought me to my knees when I was a kid at that age.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Worship the Lord, and I just want you to know that song is. So that's what the record execs know. This 16-year-old kid was on his knees praising the true and living God, and that's one of the songs that I worshipped Him through.
In my heart, there is a space I have called you, and to this space I often go to share my love.
enough for me. Thank you for being our guest, Jimmy. We love
Oh
you.
man, I love it. I hope dude, I know I'm long-winded. So,
This was great.
No.
but anytime you want me for a part 2, I'm there.
Well, and Jimmy, we just want to we want you to be able to kind of, and I know you said you don't like to do this, but promote your Patreon and your website. Could you tell
Sure.
our viewers and listeners where they can look you up at?
Sure, you can go to www.patreon.com/JPBII. And if that's too much to remember, just go to my website, jpbii.com, japabai.com, and it says right there, become a Patreon. And you can just hit and click there too. When you join, just know you're going to get a slew of music. But I've had a lot of people that get mad. They join and then they leave. After they get all this free music, then they just bounce on me. But the biggest thing is because they thought it was all going to be thrash metal and all this. And I was like, where have you guys been? I mean, it's like, I mean, and B, I mean, how could any believer get mad over my Amy Grant cover? Did you hear the Lead Me On cover?
No.
No, it's on YouTube with me and Jim. You should go watch it. I mean, dude, it's on Jim's website, it's over like 50,000-60,000 views. And on mine, it's like almost at 10,000 views. Dude, her own people reached out. Her guitar player reached out and sent me an email saying, dude, you guys nailed it, And I love the song "Lead Me On." That's what it's called.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so I mean, but who could get mad at that and say, what his exact words? See, I knew you weren't Christian covering that song. Really? Okay. Like he didn't say anything about the Monkees' "Stepping Stone" or Depeche Mode or any of the other covers, but because I did Amy Grant, yeah, I knew you weren't a Christian, man.
Okay. Well, on that note, Jimmy, what words of wisdom or what would you like to say to all your friends and fans over the years? To all of them, what would you like to say to all those folks?
Thank you. Thanks for always listening. Thanks for always giving me a chance. Thanks for the ones that have stuck by me that through every phase. Thanks. Because it's hard. It's hard to believe that when I did start this back when I was 15 years old, I didn't think I'd be this age with people that still remember the songs we did then. I love it when we break into Speckled Bird. When we broke into that in Puerto Rico when we played, and it was hilarious. It was the first time we ever played on the island. And when we started playing it, and to hear over 1,000 people sing it, I mean, it was like, okay, No Time I get, Weapons I get, but Speckled Bird, these guys were hardcore long timers. They were long hauler Deliverance fans. And man, I thank those people with all my heart, because it's when you're a fan, you're there through thick and thin. The fair weather fan that's only there for the hit. I always think of Homer Simpson. Remember how he hated the local baseball team, but then the minute they were on they were in the pennant finals and all this other stuff, all of a sudden he goes out of the bar, comes back with a jersey and a hat, foam finger, And, I always think of those kind of fans. Those were the ones that bought Weapons and nothing ever else. And that's okay. God bless them. That's awesome. But the ones that have stuck by me through everything, from Greetings, from Space Called You, from Victory and Weapons, and all the way through to hear what I say, or subversive kind, even, you know, subversive kind's a fun album. I mean, it's very politically driven.
Black
Yeah, man, but it was a fun album to do, you know. But I'll never forget. Yeah, I mean, if Jim and Victor were reading all my lyrics, you know, they're like, "You sound angry." I'm like, really? I'm just politically commenting without naming parties.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, well, I mean, we do know your politics, but man, this is like really angry, and you're not supposed to let anybody know your politics. And I go, well, nobody really does, because I do sound angry, but you're not sure who I'm angry at.
Yeah.
We just want to thank you, Jimmy, and all the members, past and present, of Deliverance. And me and Kent say this to a lot of our artists. You guys were like our youth ministers. I know Kent said that earlier, but you really were. I mean, you know, just through your music and the lyrics. And I don't know if you know how much you have ministered to us and everyone else, but it means a lot to us, for back in the day, and for still doing that now. We really appreciate that, Jimmy.
Thank you. You know, that to hear that means a lot to me, you know, because, you know, I'll leave it at this. There are many days I sit in this very chair, and I sit and I stare at, you know, at everything, and the screens, and my guitars hanging on the wall, and just say, why am I doing this? Nobody cares. You know, I am not going to leave my thumbprint on the planet like I wanted to before I shed this mortal coil. And being on a call like this reminds me that I did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Most definitely, Jimmy. And we close out each of our programs with something called Message from Home. I pick out a scripture that I think relates to the band, or an album of the band, or whatever. And we've talked about it quite a bit, your Weapons of Warfare album and the song.
Sure.
And so I've found a scripture that I think goes
From
right along with that.
From Second Maccabees?
No, it's actually from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18. And I think you're probably familiar with that, but it reads, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything to stand, stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. I don't think I can say any more than that with what we should be doing in this life. And we just really appreciate you coming on, Jimmy. Thank you for such a great conversation. And we're going to close it out, friends. And Jimmy, if you could just stick around for a couple seconds after, that would be great. So we just want to say thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.
Catch Deliverance at Immortal Fest Part 1.
Yes.
July
Yes.
26th.
Just next month. We'll see you next
Yes.
month.
Yes. Thank you, Jimmy.
Forgiveness flowed when I do you wrong. How I wish I could undo it all. But through it all, you still smile.
Ah, got it. Oh, hold on real quick. Yes. Yes, I know. I'm in the middle of a podcast. Where was I?
That's the